I always believed our life was enviable. From the manicured garden to the sunlight streaming through the bay windows, everything appeared perfect. People passing by would smile at the sight of Daniel and me on weekend mornings, laughing over coffee, our dog wagging its tail beside us. I should have been happy. I should have felt safe, and yet there was a subtle unease that gnawed at the edges of my mind. Daniel had a way of disappearing without explanation. Sometimes it was just a few minutes. He'd step out after a phone call, returning with a vague excuse, a casual shrug, and that faint smirk that always seemed just a little too practiced. Other times he'd vanish for hours, claiming work obligations or errands, though the truth always felt heavier than the words. I found myself scanning the horizon from the kitchen window, trying to catch him coming back, trying to reassure myself that nothing was wrong. There were the phone calls, too. The ones that came in at odd hours, which he would answer in hushed tones, glancing toward me as though I didn't exist, or worse, as though I might overhear something I wasn't meant to. He laughed sometimes, a little too quickly, a little too loudly, before returning to his usual calm. I tried to ignore it, to tell myself I was imagining tension where there was none. But intuition has a way of whispering truths, even when reason refuses to acknowledge them. Even during the seemingly mundane moments, dinner in our softly lit dining room, movies curled up on the couch, there was an undercurrent, a fleeting flash of irritation in his eyes, a sigh that seemed to carry weight beyond the moment. I brushed it off, laughed it away, told myself I was being paranoid. But inside, my chest would tighten, my stomach knotted, a warning I could not yet name. And yet, our life remained flawless in the eyes of the world. The neighbors complimented our garden. Friends admired our shared smiles. Strangers envied what they perceived as marital bliss. Behind closed doors, however, I felt the first stirrings of doubt, a tiny, persistent voice questioning if the man I loved, the home I adored, were truly what they seemed. As I poured another cup of coffee that morning, I noticed a folded envelope tucked under a stack of magazines on the counter. I didn't touch it yet, not fully prepared to unravel what might be hidden within, but the seed of curiosity had been planted. The perfect facade was beginning to crack, ever so slightly, and I sensed that once it started, nothing would ever be the same. Sleep had abandoned me. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of settling floorboards. My thoughts refused to settle, circling Daniel's absences and those odd phone calls. I told myself to let it go, to trust the life we had built, but an unease gnawed at me from within, persistent and insistent. Drawn by a restless curiosity, I wandered into the study, a room I rarely entered. Dust motes danced in the lamplight as I ran my fingers over the leather-bound books lining the shelves. That's when I noticed it, a faint outline behind a row of novels, a small wooden drawer I had never seen before. My pulse quickened. Why had I never noticed this? Instinct urged me to leave it, but something deeper demanded I look. The drawer resisted slightly, as if it, too, was hesitant to reveal its secrets. When it finally opened, I froze. Inside were letters, yellowed with age, and photographs I did not recognize. One photo showed Daniel laughing with a woman whose eyes seemed familiar, yet I could not place her. Another was a letter addressed to someone named E, written in Daniel's unmistakable handwriting. My hands trembled as I picked up a letter, unfolding the carefully written words. Each line hinted at secrecy, at hidden encounters, at a life I had never known. I staggered back, my mind racing. Was I imagining this? Was it possible I had overlooked signs all these years? My chest tightened, and the air in the room seemed to thicken around me. Every instinct screamed caution, yet I could not stop myself from sifting through the contents, searching for clarity in the shadows. Daniel appeared suddenly in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. "What are you doing?" he asked, his tone deceptively calm. My heart hammered as I held up a photograph. "Who is she?" I demanded, though my voice betrayed the fear I felt. He stepped closer, a faint smile curving his lips. "You shouldn't be looking at things that don't concern you," he said softly, almost tenderly, but the underlying edge in his voice made my stomach churn. There was a calculated calm in him, a manipulation I could feel pressing against the walls of my mind. My thoughts tumbled into doubt. Was I overreacting, or was this real? I backed away, my fingers clutching the letters like lifelines. Daniel's gaze lingered, a mixture of warning and charm that left me unsteady. The room felt smaller, the shadows stretching as if they were alive, whispering secrets I was only beginning to comprehend. That night, I could not sleep. The drawer, the photographs, the letters, they haunted my mind. I replayed Daniel's words over and over, trying to discern truth from manipulation. As dawn approached, one thought persisted. Something in my life was not as it seemed, and the perfect facade I had clung to was crumbling faster than I had ever imagined. The whispers of the past and present intertwined, urging me to uncover the full truth, but I was not yet ready to face what lay beneath. Dinner had always been our sanctuary, the table a small stage where life seemed orderly. But that evening, everything felt fragile, like fine crystal trembling under invisible pressure. Our neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, had invited us over for a casual dinner, and I noticed immediately how Daniel's polished charm seemed forced, taut, like a mask straining to hold together. He smiled politely at Mrs. Callahan, laughed at her jokes, yet his eyes flickered, brief, restless movements that spoke volumes. I felt a chill crawl down my spine as I realized I was noticing things I had never seen before. The way he avoided my gaze, the subtle tension in his jaw, the brief flinch whenever she asked about his work. His composure, so carefully constructed, was slipping. Halfway through dinner, a doorbell interrupted our awkward conversation. A tall man with a calm demeanor appeared. Harris, a family friend I had met only a few times before. He carried a quiet authority, the kind that filled a room without effort. Daniel greeted him warmly, but the warmth felt performative, a performance I was beginning to see through. As we sat, conversation flowed, yet Daniel's words began to reveal cracks. He spoke of business trips I could not verify, of meetings with clients whose names I did not recognize. Comment he made about Harris's last visit rang strangely hollow, as if rehearsed. Yet rehearsals cannot hide the flicker of guilt I sensed beneath his surface. I tried to mask my anxiety, my hands clenched beneath the table. My mind raced, questioning if I was seeing patterns where none existed, or if the truth was finally unraveling before me. Every word he spoke carried dual meanings, every gesture a possible clue. My chest tightened and I found myself holding my breath, waiting for the moment I would have to confront him. Though fear kept me silent, Harris watched us with subtle curiosity, his eyes flicking between Daniel and me, sensing the tension I dared not voice. I wondered if he already knew something I did not, or perhaps had suspected the same truths I was only beginning to grasp. By the time we returned home, the polished veneer of our life felt shattered, like shards of glass scattered across a smooth floor. Daniel's smile no longer reassured me. Instead, it hinted at secrets I was not ready to face. The unease that had been growing within me now demanded acknowledgement, whispering that the world I trusted might be a carefully constructed illusion. I went to bed that night, unable to sleep, my thoughts a tangled web of suspicion and fear. The cracks were spreading, subtle but undeniable, and I knew, one way or another, I could no longer ignore them. Sleep had eluded me again, the remnants of dinner with Daniel and Harris gnawing at my thoughts. I needed answers, and the house offered none. My eyes fell on the small stack of journals tucked away on the bookshelf in our bedroom. Old, leather-bound notebooks Daniel had never mentioned. Hesitation gripped me, but the curiosity that had begun to consume me would not be denied. I opened the first journal carefully, the pages brittle and filled with Daniel's neat, precise handwriting. At first, the entries seemed mundane. Work, notes, daily reflections. But as I read further, a different picture began to emerge. Mentions of a woman named Emily appeared repeatedly, often accompanied by emotional pleas, apologies, or sharp anger. Each line hinted at a relationship obsessive in nature, a love that had spiraled into something darker than I had ever imagined. A flashback struck me suddenly, unbidden. I remembered Daniel answering the phone late one night, his voice low, almost tender, before hanging up abruptly. Could it have been her, Emily? My chest tightened, the realization settling like ice in my veins. The man I had thought I knew so completely now seemed like a stranger inhabiting the skin of my husband. The next journal entry revealed more than I had expected. Daniel wrote of lies told to protect himself, of moments where truth and deception blurred indistinguishably. He described carefully managing appearances, ensuring that no one, including me, could ever glimpse the chaos beneath his composed exterior. A shiver ran down my spine. Every charming gesture, every polite smile now carried the weight of intentional concealment. My phone rang, cutting sharply through the silence. The unknown number flashed on the screen. Hesitation warred with necessity, and I answered. A low, cautious voice whispered, "You don't know the half of it. Look closer. He's not who you think he is." The line went dead before I could respond. My mind raced. Was this a warning, a threat, or someone reaching out to help me uncover the truth? I sank onto the bed, the journal spread before me, pages fluttering as though alive with their secrets. Daniel's past was a maze of obsession, deceit, and careful manipulation. Each revelation made my stomach twist in knots. I realized with dawning horror that his past actions were not isolated incidents. They bled into our present, shaping a reality I had only just begun to comprehend. The shadows of Emily, the hidden calls, the subtle manipulations, they all converged into a single, terrifying thought. Daniel had been hiding more than I could have ever imagined, and those secrets were now reaching into the life I trusted completely. My pulse thundered in my ears, a relentless reminder that the perfect facade had always been a lie. I closed the journals, my hands trembling, aware that once these shadows were uncovered, there would be no turning back. Tomorrow, I would confront him, carefully, subtly, as I had learned to do, but tonight I allowed myself the smallest taste of fear, knowing that the past was never truly past, and that it was coming to claim the present. The morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, but it did little to warm the chill in our home. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, coffee in hand, reading the newspaper as if nothing had changed. I tried to steady my breathing, the journals from last night still heavy in my mind. I had confronted him subtly, about a call he had received late at night. His response had been calm, almost tender, yet underneath it pulsed a current of control I could not ignore. "You're imagining things," he said softly, his eyes meeting mine with that familiar, disarming smile. "I never had a call like that. You must have been dreaming." The words should have angered me. They should have stirred indignation. Instead, they planted seeds of doubt. Had I misremembered? My mind raced, trying to reconcile my own observations with his confident denials. The house felt smaller, the walls closing in as if they, too, were complicit in his subtle manipulation. Throughout the day, he continued, small gestures, tiny lies, half-truths that twisted reality. A photograph misplaced? It was always there. You just forgot. A fleeting glance at my phone. You're reading too much into it. Each denial was precise, surgical, designed to make me question my own mind. My chest ached with the effort of holding on to my own perceptions, to resist the disorienting swirl of guilt and confusion he imposed. Even the house seemed to echo the tension. The kitchen lights flickered briefly. The wind rattled the window panes, and the familiar hum of the refrigerator sounded ominous rather than mundane. Shadows stretched along the hallway, turning ordinary corners into spaces of suspicion. I found myself pausing in each room, scanning for signs that something was truly amiss, or perhaps just confirming what Daniel wanted me to believe, that I could not trust my own senses. By evening, the emotional exhaustion was palpable. Daniel moved through the house with effortless authority, his charm intact yet now tinged with something colder, something carefully restrained. When he spoke, it was always gentle enough to soothe, precise enough to confuse. My thoughts, once a clear stream of certainty, now resembled a stormy tide, rising and retreating with every word, every glance, every sigh he let slip. I sat alone, in the living room, hands clasped tightly, staring at the shadows stretching across the floor. I remembered the journals, the letters, the photographs, the whispered phone call, each a shard of truth threatening to cut through the fog he created. Yet as I waited, heart pounding, I realized that Daniel's power lay not in brute force, but in the quiet erosion of my own confidence. And as the night deepened, I understood the unspoken rule of our home. The line between reality and deception was his to draw, and my only choice was whether to resist or surrender completely. The phone rang in the dead of night, shattering the fragile silence of our home. I answered with a trembling hand, barely able to understand the voice on the other end. "Mrs. Collins, it's Detective Marlowe. There's been an incident. Your neighbor, Mr. Whitman, has been found dead. We need you to come to the scene." I dropped the receiver, my body rigid. Daniel appeared behind me almost immediately, concern etched across his features, though I could sense the careful calculation behind it. "What happened?" he asked, though the calm in his voice felt rehearsed, almost too precise. I shook my head, unable to speak, my mind racing through every conversation, every glance, every detail I had previously dismissed. The crime scene was cordoned off with yellow tape, the street eerily quiet under the flickering glow of streetlights. Detective Marlowe greeted me with solemn eyes, guiding me toward the house. The door hung ajar, revealing chaos, furniture overturned, signs of a struggle, and the lifeless body of Mr. Whitman sprawled on the floor. My stomach churned, bile rising as the reality of death sank in. Daniel's connection to the victim surfaced immediately. He had met Mr. Whitman frequently for business matters, casual conversations that now seemed suspiciously purposeful. My chest tightened as I realized that Daniel's seemingly innocuous relationship with him could not be ignored. Each detail, the meetings, the phone calls, the hurried explanations, now felt sinister. Detective Marlowe's voice broke through my thoughts. "Mrs. Collins, did Mr. Whitman ever discuss Daniel? Anything unusual in their interactions?" I swallowed hard, knowing every answer could implicate the man I loved. He mentioned some business dealings," I replied cautiously, my voice quivering. "But nothing that seemed alarming." Daniel stood nearby, his face an inscrutable mask, his eyes tracking every reaction, every nuance. When I glanced at him, a shiver ran down my spine. Was he aware of more than he let on? Did he orchestrate this? I felt a sickening mix of fear and guilt, complicity by proximity, ignorance, or perhaps denial. The room smelled of antiseptic and decay, a haunting contrast to the polished life we maintained outside. Shadows of furniture and broken glass stretched across the floor like silent witnesses, emphasizing the fragility of my reality. My mind grasped at the edges of understanding, desperate to reconcile the husband I knew with the darkness surrounding me. As the detectives collected evidence and spoke quietly among themselves, Daniel placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder, the charm in his gesture now a bitter reminder of manipulation. My thoughts spun, fear, disbelief, confusion, and anger mingling into a suffocating fog. The night left me trembling, aware that the first death had been revealed, and that the path forward would force me to confront truths I was only beginning to glimpse. Outside, the street was silent again, yet the echoes of the crime lingered in my chest. The perfect facade had shattered, leaving behind shards of suspicion and a chilling awareness. Nothing in our life was as it seemed. The days following Mr. Whitman's death were a haze of suspicion and unease. I could no longer rely on my own judgment, and the journals, photographs, and unsettling phone call had set my mind racing. That's when Harris stepped in, offering help with a quiet authority I had learned to trust. "You're not imagining things," he said one evening, his voice low, steady. "Daniel has been hiding more than you realize. Let's find out what." We began our investigation cautiously, meeting in cafes and walking along quiet streets, exchanging whispers and observing Daniel from afar. Harris had an uncanny ability to notice details I missed. The small transfers in bank statements, subtle lies in conversations, and people who appeared in Daniel's past yet were conveniently absent from his present. I realized the threads of deception ran deeper than I had feared. One evening, we examined some of Daniel's old financial records. The numbers were neatly organized, Yet beneath the surface lay irregularities, accounts in other names, unexplained deposits, and withdrawals timed suspiciously around events I now questioned. "He's been laundering money," Harris murmured, scanning a page of documents. I felt a chill. Money, lies, manipulation. It all pointed to a man who carefully curated both his charm and his crimes. As our investigation deepened, we discovered hints of illicit relationships. A restaurant reservation under a different name, vague hotel receipts, photographs of Daniel with women I did not recognize. Each revelation made my chest tighten, fear and betrayal twisting together in a bitter knot. Harris's calm, analytical presence grounded me, but even he could not disguise the gravity of what we were uncovering. I confronted Daniel subtly that evening, hoping to gauge his reaction. "I've noticed some inconsistencies," I said carefully, forcing my voice to remain steady. He smiled, his charm effortless, yet something in his eyes flickered, a subtle warning. "You're reading too much into things, darling," he said smoothly. "I don't know why you insist on imagining problems where there are none." His words, so familiar, now felt like instruments of manipulation, sharp and precise. I realized the extent of his psychological control, how effortlessly he could make me question my own perceptions, even as evidence mounted before my eyes. That night, Harris and I pored over every detail, connecting patterns, building a fragile web of truth. Each discovery strengthened my resolve, yet fear remained, gnawing at the edges of courage. I knew Daniel's charm would not fade. His ability to manipulate was matched only by his meticulous concealment of guilt. As the hours passed, I understood that the life I thought I knew was a carefully constructed lie. Secrets were unraveling piece by piece, and once fully revealed, nothing about our marriage or Daniel himself would ever feel safe again. The rain lashed against the windows, turning our home into a shadowed cage. I confronted Daniel in the living room, the journals, photographs, and evidence Harris and I had gathered laid out on the coffee table. Every flicker of lightning illuminated the tension in his face, the carefully maintained charm now brittle at the edges. "You need to explain this," I said, my voice trembling, holding up a photograph of him with another woman. "All of it, Emily, the accounts, the lies. I need the truth, Daniel." He looked at me with an unsettling calm, like a predator cornered yet confident in his ability to strike. "I suppose I owe you something," he said slowly, voice low, almost intimate. "But the truth is more complicated than you can understand." My chest tightened. "I've been patient. I've tried to trust you. Don't deflect." He leaned back, the lamplight casting half his face in shadow. "Emily was a mistake, a storm I couldn't control. The money, the lies, they were necessary for us, for everything we've built." His words dripped with persuasion, but beneath them lurked a cold rationality. "You made someone die," I whispered, the weight of the crime pressing against my ribcage. "Mr. Whitman, how could you?" His expression softened, almost remorseful. "It wasn't like that. You think you understand morality, but you don't see the calculations behind it. Every move, every consequence I managed. For us. For you, the manipulation was precise, surgical." He shifted blame subtly, making the chaos he created appear inevitable, almost unavoidable. My mind reeled, torn between fear, love, and revulsion. Should I protect him, as part of me still wanted, or expose the full truth no matter the cost? The room seemed to shrink around me. The rain's rhythm pounded against the glass, echoing the heartbeat in my ears. Shadows crawled across the walls, stretching long and threatening, as though the house itself had absorbed the darkness he carried. Every detail, the gleam of his eyes, the way his fingers flexed against the armrest, the tension in his jaw felt magnified, as though the world had narrowed to this single confrontation. "I can't undo what's been done," he continued, voice steady, almost hypnotic. "But you need to decide where your loyalty lies. You know who I am. You know the cost of the truth." I sank into the couch, trembling, my hands gripping the edge as if it could anchor me. The moral weight was suffocating. This man, my husband, the person I had loved completely, was capable of deception, manipulation, and death. And yet there remained the man who had once been warm, affectionate, and protective. The man I had trusted with my life. As the storm raged outside, I realized there was no turning back. I had to confront the consequences of his actions, even if it meant shattering the fragile remnants of the life I had known. Tonight the confessions had begun, but the full reckoning had only just started. Morning light filtered through the curtains, sharp and unforgiving. The storm from the previous night had passed, but its residue lingered in my chest, a heavy, unrelenting pressure. I could no longer wait for answers to arrive by chance. If Daniel had hidden the truth this long, it was on me to uncover it fully. I returned to the journals and photographs, spreading them across the dining table with meticulous care. Each page, each image, each note was a piece of the puzzle he had tried so desperately to conceal. The deeper I examined, the clearer the pattern became. Not just financial manipulation, not just lies, but evidence pointing toward far darker deeds. Murders carefully obscured, betrayals meticulously orchestrated. My stomach churned as reality settled in, a cold certainty replacing the lingering doubts I had clung to. Harris had given me tools, contacts, observation strategies, discreet ways to gather proof without alerting Daniel. Together we traced transactions, confirmed meetings, and uncovered digital footprints that tied him to past victims. Each discovery heightened the tension, the fear, and simultaneously, my resolve. The terror that had once immobilized me began to transform into a sharp, dangerous focus. Detective Marlowe became more involved as I brought forward the evidence. His stern demeanor and precise questioning offered a kind of clarity I had not known I needed. I observed Daniel carefully during these interactions, noting the subtle ways he maintained his composure, while the cracks widened beneath the surface. He smiled, deflected, manipulated, but even his practiced charm could not hide the growing weight of the truth pressing against him. I confronted moments of fear and doubt. Would I be seen as complicit? Would justice come quickly enough to protect others? But the alternative, silence, was no longer an option. Each night I documented everything meticulously, preparing for the day when the full scope of his crimes would be undeniable. By the end of the week, I had gathered enough to shake the foundations of the life I had once thought secure. The evidence was irrefutable: financial crimes, betrayals, and ties to multiple deaths. My fear remained, but it was tempered now by determination, a steadfast willingness to see this through to the end. As I closed the folder, my hands trembling but steady, I realized that this process had changed me. I was no longer the passive wife, the woman living under a facade of normalcy. I was resolute, vigilant, and prepared for the confrontation that was inevitably coming. The pieces were in place, and soon the truth would no longer be a shadow lurking in the dark. It would shine, exposing Daniel fully. Tonight I would rest, but tomorrow, everything would move closer to the reckoning I had long feared and long awaited. The courtroom was cold, sterile, and impossibly quiet. Daniel sat at the defendant's table, his posture perfect, his expression calm, almost unreadable. I sat a few rows back, the weight of everything I had discovered pressing on my chest like a physical force. The evidence I had gathered, the truths I had unearthed, all pointed unmistakably to him. And yet the man in front of me, the one I had loved, trusted, and believed in, sat as if nothing had changed. Flashbacks assaulted me. The charming dinners, the whispered apologies, the late-night phone calls, the journals, the letters, the photographs, and finally the confessions. Each memory cut deeper, a reminder of how thoroughly he had concealed his true self. I remembered the subtle manipulations, the gaslighting, the precise way he had shifted blame, making me question my own sanity. Love had intertwined with deception, leaving a tangled web of guilt and heartbreak in its wake. The judge's voice brought me back to the present. Testimonies were read aloud, detailing financial fraud, deception, and the murders connected to Daniel. Each revelation was another blow, a confirmation of everything I had feared. My hands clenched in my lap, nails biting into my palms as I realized how deeply I had been caught in the web of his actions. Harris sat beside me, a steady presence, his eyes reflecting both empathy and urgency. Detective Marlowe approached quietly, nodding in silent acknowledgement of the work I had done. They had believed me when I spoke, acted, and provided evidence. Together, we had dismantled the carefully constructed illusion Daniel had maintained for years. And yet, the emotional toll was immense. I struggled to reconcile the man I had known with the man revealed by truth. Love, betrayal, fear, and guilt swirled in a turbulent storm within me. How could someone capable of such darkness also be someone I had once trusted implicitly? The question haunted me, echoing in every corner of my mind, refusing to settle. Outside the courtroom, the sun hung low, casting long shadows across the street. The world seemed unchanged, yet my perception of it had shifted irrevocably. Every smile, every gesture of kindness now carried a tinge of suspicion. Trust had become fragile, easily shattered by the revelations of those we believe we know. As I walked home, I allowed myself to grieve, not just for the lives lost, but for the illusions that had once defined my marriage. The ashes of the life I had imagined lay scattered at my feet, yet from them rose a sense of clarity, a resolve to never let deception control me again. Tonight, the final chapters of Daniel's life as I had known it were closing. The aftermath would linger, heavy and haunting. But I knew I had survived the storm, ready to face whatever truth remained, and whatever revelations awaited in the final reckoning. The courtroom felt suffocating, the air thick with anticipation and tension. I sat at the witness stand, hands folded in my lap, every muscle taut with dread. The world outside seemed distant, irrelevant. Here, time had slowed, each moment stretching into eternity. 4 hours awaited me. 4 hours of reliving memories I had tried desperately to bury. 4 hours of exposing truths I had once hoped would remain hidden. Detective Marlowe's steady presence was a faint comfort. Harris's supportive nods from the gallery a reminder that I was not alone. Yet the moment the prosecutor's gaze met mine, the weight of expectation pressed down, and I felt the full force of what I was about to do. "Please state your name for the record," the prosecutor said, voice neutral, controlled. I drew a deep breath. "Emily Collins," I whispered. Questions followed, calm at first, factual, then progressively sharper, cutting into the heart of my memories. Each answer I gave was a careful balancing act, truthful enough to ensure justice, precise enough to avoid unnecessary exposure of the personal pain Daniel had inflicted. The photographs, journals, and letters were presented, their contents exposed to the light of scrutiny. Daniel sat impassive, eyes fixed on me, his calm almost infuriating in its calculated precision. And then came the confrontation. The cross-examination was relentless. He smiled, questioned, twisted phrasing in ways meant to unsettle me. "Are you certain of what you saw?" he asked, his voice deceptively soft. "Could you have misunderstood?" I swallowed the panic rising in my throat. Memories flashed, the phone calls, the hidden drawer, the journals, the first crime scene, his confessions in the dark. No manipulation could rewrite what I had lived. "I remember," I said steadily, the tremor in my voice betraying the terror I felt. "I know the truth. I saw the evidence. I cannot unsee it." Hours passed in a blur of testimony, objections, and the quiet scribbling of notes. Each revelation peeled back layers of Daniel's carefully constructed life, exposing the full extent of his deception and crimes. The courtroom's walls seemed to close in, shadows stretching, lights glaring, as though the house I had once trusted had transformed into a stage for the ultimate reckoning. By the 4th hour, I was exhausted, trembling, yet resolute. The verdicts were read, justice measured and delivered. Daniel's crimes would no longer remain hidden. The law had acted, and the weight of truth had finally tipped the balance. Yet relief was bittersweet. Love, betrayal, and guilt lingered, interwoven with the knowledge that no sentence could erase the emotional scars. The aftermath of what I had endured, the trust shattered, the illusions destroyed, would remain with me forever. As I left the courtroom, the sun dipping below the horizon, I understood the moral complexity of what had transpired. Justice had been served, but at a profound emotional cost. Shadows of deception and manipulation would linger in memory, reminding me and the world that sometimes the line between reality and perception, love and betrayal, is far more fragile than we care to admit.